Welcome back, everyone. I can see Robbie's just getting ready to start his talk. I'll hand over to you, Robbie. He's a freelance CTO and an advisor. Go for it.
All right. Thank you very much, Andy. Hello. Yeah, today we're going to talk about decision making unmuted and how to get everyone to speak up. Hopefully, it's going to build very nicely on the content which we've had so far. We're going to look at very similar things, but through different angles, some slightly different theory, and some different hands-on techniques. So hopefully, it's going to be useful for everyone. Right. So the takeaway, these are things which I'd really love for you to kind of take away from today. So I'm going to be covering 5 tools which you can start using today. I know it's kind of the end of the day, so it might be tomorrow, but you can start using in your next meeting, in your next kind of conversation. So that is really the aim today. So we'll go through all of these tools, really actionable things which you can start using straight away. Right. So we're going to be doing a little bit of interactivity. I'm going to be using Miro for this. We're going to put that link. It looks like it's already on the screen. If you don't want to share, you can just follow along at home with a pen and paper. Anything that you will capture will be on the screen, will be read by other people. So understand if you don't want to. There's going to be elements where you can interact without contributing, without writing anything down. So you might want to be in there for that. So you might want to just have it open in a tab ready to go. But don't feel like you have to write anything if you don't want to. Okay, we're going to start with a pop quiz. So a bat and a ball cost £1.10 together. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? Please put your answers in the chat. I'm going to watch here, so please just be quick. First thing that pops into your mind: how much is the ball? A couple of answers so far. Any other takers? Right. Well, you've either obviously heard this one before, or you're all very good thinkers. So I was kind of expecting a lot of people to be writing 10 pence in here, which is, when I've run these sessions before, the most common answer. And in those instances, when people write 10 pence and the bat is £1 more, then that would be £1.10, which would equal £1.20 when we're after £1.10. Of course, the ball is 5 pence, the bat is £1 and 5 pence, and the total is £1.10. So for anyone who might have been thinking 10 pence, but didn't write it in the chat after they started seeing people putting 5 pence in, what's happening here is there's a concept called System 1, and your System 1 thinking might have told you that the ball was 10 pence. Evidently, a lot of people were not thinking that. And what's happened here is attribute substitution. So what we've done is, what our brains would have done is taken a simple calculation and swapped it for the more complex one. So we've passed the £1.10 into a large amount and a small amount, £1 and 10 pence. This question also almost intentionally shows just ones and zeros. So our mind might just take some shortcuts, just sees ones and zeros, doesn't see any other number, and it does some kind of parsing based on that. The reflective system, or System 2 thinking, may have offered you pause to sense if you were right. You might have thought one number and then sense checked it, or you might have kind of gone straight to that. So what's happening here is we have these kind of two systems in our mind. This was proposed by Daniel Kahneman in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. It is a classic. I'm sure many of you know about it. Probably many of you have read it. But just as a kind of a recap, our System 1 mind is fast. It is subconscious. It's automatic. And it's really good at making everyday decisions. But because of all those things, it's quite error prone. It takes shortcuts. It uses heuristics. It kind of uses patterns to try and get to those things. And it can be tricked into giving a wrong answer. Now, System 2 thinking is slow, it's conscious, it's effortful, and it's really good for complex decisions. So for me, that would be sort of long division. It tends to be more reliable because we are more thoughtful and we are going through it systematically when we're trying to calculate something. So that's one thing to be mindful of. We're going to park that for a second, and I want to kind of touch on a concept called anchor bias. So this is where a discussion or a decision is anchored by the first thing that is said. So you can imagine if you're in a room, virtual or in person, and you pose a question, the first person to give an answer can anchor what everyone else said in the room. So whether that is a number, whether that is a binary yes, no, we should do it, we shouldn't do it, that can have an anchor bias effect on the rest of the group. Now, I want to talk about a study which was proposed, which was run a little while ago, where judges, these are professional trained judges, many years in training, qualification, they were put in an experiment. They knew it was an experiment, where they were given a hypothetical case to adjudicate, and they had to pass a sentence on to perpetrator. There were an instance where the prosecution, or the person, the experimenter acting as the prosecutor, gave a recommendation, and there were two steps. One prosecutor would give a low number of months, and one would give a high number of months, and then the judge would pass their sentence, and they catalogue those. So in this case, and the sources down here, so the low anchor, so someone saying, I want this person to receive a low number of months for the sentence, the judge said 4 months on average. Now, the person with the high anchor was 6 months on average. That is 50% an increase. Now, these are judges. There's no other information which is changed between these two apart from the information, the request for the sentence duration that is passed by the prosecutor. Now, the judges knew it was random. There was a follow-on experiment where the judges were again adjudicating a kind of a sentence, but they threw a dice before rolling it. So there wasn't even a prosecutor asking for something, they just threw a dice. When the dice came up low, on average, they would have, in this case, 5 years of imprisonment for a low scoring dice. And for a high scoring dice, they would have 8 years of imprisonment. That over 100% increase, right? So from 5 to 8. So it's hugely significant for this information to create this noise in the system. Okay, why is this relevant? How can this affect you in your company, in your teams, and in your decisions? You might see this in estimation. So you might go to a team and you might ask for an estimate. The first person potentially to give an estimate might anchor the rest of the team. Now, they might say something very high, and then the other team members might be thinking, oh, that person maybe knows more than I do, so I'm going to say, yes, it's going to be this, somewhere in that region of that high number. Or equally, they might say a low number, and everyone says, again, maybe that person knows more than me, so therefore we're going to come down. And you, as the person who might be requesting this estimate, if your answer is very different from that initial anchor, you might feel kind of confused by that, because you might think, like, I'm anchored to this number. I expect this number to be here. Similarly for salary negotiation. So you might kind of go in, any number which is said, first of all, is often the anchor, which will be there or thereabouts, high or low. So that one to think about next time you're going in for those conversations. Vendor costs, again, very similar. We've got our cloud, we've got our SaaS providers. If we're comparing different providers, we might go off the cost which we first received from someone and use that as an anchor to decide what's the better value than that first number which we saw. So again, we're also susceptible to this. And really, any decision, as I kind of said, if we're in a room and we're going around a room and we want to know what should we prioritize, or should we acquire this company or not acquire this company, or should we go to the pizzeria for lunch? The first person who kind of answers that question is going to potentially anchor the rest of the people contributing to that discussion. So we don't necessarily want that, right? If we want a kind of a clean room decision, we want all things on the table, we want to consolidate all the information, then make a very clean judgment on what we should be doing, whether that is an estimation, whether we should or shouldn't do something, we should or shouldn't buy something, or even where we're going to go for lunch. So we're going to jump to Miro. So there's a link in the chat. If you can kind of jump into Miro. Again, if you're following along at home, you don't want to write anything, you can grab a pen and paper or a sticky note or something and follow along at home. Okay, before we do that, the first tool I'm going to introduce you to is called Think, Write, Share. It kind of does what it says on the tin. We're going to do some thought exercises here. So I'm going to pose a question, and I'd like everyone to be thinking about this and then writing about it in Miro. So the question is, what is stopping your company from making better decisions today? Now, don't write anything. Just think for 20 seconds. And we're going to have a really excruciating 20 seconds of nothing. Just think about this. Don't write anything. All right. In some cases, I can let that go on for a minute or two. In some cases, if you're in the room and you're posing a very difficult question, it's okay to have those uncomfortable silences. I can hear my next door neighbor's builders shouting about something though. The second tool, right? So we've got that. We've had a thought. Now we want to introduce anonymity. And we're going to see all these kind of tools stacked on top of each other, and then we're going to decompose them as well. So in Miro, I've set it up. I've taken some screenshots earlier. So I've set something up called private mode. Now, many of you may be very familiar with Miro. You may be very familiar with these tools, but just for completeness, I'm just going to share what I've done. You might be using other tools which do very, very similar things. So I have turned on private mode in Miro. What I will do, I'll make sure I've done that, so that when you are writing anything, you see the sticky in the top right, it just appears as a squiggle, and then the cursor where you are just says anonymous. So this means that we don't know who is there and what they're writing. What they're writing is hidden. So this kind of prevents me thinking like, what is that next person writing? Oh, that's great. I won't write anything because that person's written something, or like, oh, I will write something which is basically the same. Again, it's to kind of create like a clean room environment. Okay, so let's jump into Miro, and if you can grab a sticky. I'm just going to turn on private mode. All right, everyone's kind of come in. So on the left-hand corner here, you can grab a sticky note, double click, and then say something. So you can see what I'm writing, of course, because I've got my screen shared. But if you grab your stickies, add something. We're just going to do this for kind of a minute, give everyone a chance to add something. Just because we have sort of limited time, I'm going to stop this now. If we were doing this in a real session, you would probably you would be much more interactive and asking to make sure that everyone had a chance to write something down. But I'm just going to end this for everyone right now. So this is going to reveal the content, but not the author. So I'm going to click that. I'm going to turn it off for all. Right. So hopefully you should get a message saying I'm turning off private mode. All right, we can kind of come in here and see everything. Right, so we've got some great examples here now. Now we want to introduce the next component, which is anonymous voting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on voting. So have a moment to kind of flick through. I'm going to give everyone 3 votes. I'm just going to set the timer for 2 minutes at the minute, just so we can kind of go on. So, look, what I'd like everyone to do is go in. You can click the little plus arrows on the sticky notes to vote for the thing which you think is most interesting. what most pertinent to your situation. You have three votes. You could put all three on one. You could spread them out across three different cards, or put two on one and one on the other. So we're just going to have a few seconds here to give everyone a chance to vote. And if you can see my screen, you can see that we've got a vote kind of countdown. We've got a few people who have done their votes. They've marked themselves as done, and almost done here. So I'm just going to end this now, again, just in the interest of time. Sorry if you didn't get your vote there. So, ta-da, we have done we've done anonymous votes. Now, again, if you can see my screen on the right-hand side, we can see an ordered list of the votes. So we can see with 7 votes, ineffective decision making and collaboration at the exec team, followed by the lack of trust with 6 votes there. And you can see the numbers on the sticky notes themselves individually, as well as on the right hand side. So we've done a couple of things here, right? So let me just bring back this. So we actually kind of saw this, how I set it up, what it looks like. We'll go through there. So we had our 3 votes. Okay, so we're not going to be able to really do this right now today, but tool 4 is one called Everyone Speaks Once Before Anyone Speaks Twice, which has the outstanding acronym of ESOBAS. So what this is it's really kind of a rule of engagement, which you might set at the beginning of a meeting, so that when we do this, when we have this kind of conversation, we're going to make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak before anyone speaks twice. This can really temper the people who just want to jump in, and they might be outstanding contributions from those people, but we just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to have a voice. We might go round a room based on the seating chart where people are. A virtual room may be based by where you can see the windows or other factors, which we'll jump into in a little bit later. So we're going to have this discussion. We're going to look at this. So I'm just going to kind of go in. We're going to read a few out. So we saw here the ineffective decision, lack of trust, not enough quality data and metrics, poor process or no process, too much red tape, lack of communication, slow to pull the trigger, exhaustion, client commitments, EBITDA targets, and employee skill sets. So we might have a discussion here. I might say, I really agree with this. I really feel strongly about this, or I don't feel strongly about this, and I don't think it should be here, or I would think about it in a different way. So we're going to have a debate at this moment in time. Again, in this kind of context, in this webinar context, it's a little bit tricky for us to do, but that is the intention of what we would be doing right now. So this kind of comes onto the 5th and final tool, this vote, discuss, vote, which is another one of Daniel Kahneman's tools, but from his book Noise, where we're trying to do this kind of, we're going to try and get rid of noise and create this decision hygiene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another voting session, have a read of those things, and I'm going to give another vote. So let me go back in here, and I'm going to create a new session. But now I'm just going to give one vote for everyone, and you have to vote for your most important, the thing which you feel most strongly about, based on that really rigorous debate which we just had and the previous round of voting which we've done. All right, we are done. Right, so I'm going to end that. That's building our results. And then, ta-da! Okay, so we have ineffective decision making at the exec team, and then not enough data and metrics, and then lack of trust. So that. So we can kind of see we've kind of gone through a few iterations of this. We might have done 3 votes at that stage, or we might have kept it at the one which we did. Again, just for expediency, kind of trying to go through. So takeaways. So what have we done? We've looked at 5 tools, right? And we're going to slow down a little bit now. We're going to talk about some of these things. So the first thing is think, write, share. Again, it does what it says on the tin. What this does, this kind of thinking, this pause, it's intended to engage that system 2 thinking. So think about that bat and ball example. So it's trying to engage that more thoughtful, effortful piece. And that pause of like, I don't want you to write, because if you start writing, you're not thinking. I just want you to think and sit with that awkwardness of a silence in a room. The intention here is to get our best response, right? Not just our first response. And again, the thinking time stops people from blurting out of like, we should go to the pizzeria, or like, I really want this as the next priority, or like, I think we should buy this company because of X. It's just trying to make sure that each individual has that time to sit with the question, whatever's being posed, and think of their best response, not just their first. Writing it down helps individuals pre-commit to that answer. So it avoids the anchor bias. I mean, how many times have you been in a room where you're going around a room and you're not the first person, but the first person gives an answer and the second person might give a very similar answer? By the time it gets to you, or you might hear in the room, oh, yeah, what that person said, or oh, it's just, I've just got something built on that. It's just a little extra, but basically what that person said. If we've written it down, we're basically pre-committed to saying something. Now, you might not say it because you don't feel comfortable in saying it, but you have made that pre-commitment by writing that down. So the think, write, share, and then that share, you could use the everyone speak once before everyone speaks twice to make sure that everyone gets a chance to share their idea. And you could do that with the anonymous tooling or not, or just kind of in an open area. But just kind of trying to get that system to thinking, that pre-commit, get everyone to have that part of that contribution in that conversation. We have next added layers of anonymity. So we used the tools in Miro. So you couldn't see what was being written. So it would stop you from copying, intentionally or otherwise, right? You're just not influenced by whatever someone else is writing. And you are, and in our case, we didn't reveal the author of those. Now, in these tools in Miro like this, you can get it to, you can configure it so it does reveal the author, or not. In our case, we had not, right? Because we want it to be completely anonymous, right? The reason for this, it encourages things that might not otherwise be said. You might have what you consider to be an unpopular or contrarian opinion of what we should do, what priority we should have. Should we not make that acquisition because you don't feel that it's going to be appropriate for whatever reason, or even like pizza, I want to go somewhere else. So it gives people a space to say things which might not otherwise be said. It also has the power of decoupling an idea from the individual. We have, we can be biased to give an idea more or less favor based on the person which it comes from. So you can think about this in terms of the authority, right? So, well, my boss says this is a good idea, so therefore it's a good idea. Or this person is junior and therefore it's not a good idea. Or this person is from a group which I don't associate with and I don't like their ideas. So it decouples that. So we can really just allow the ideas to kind of come through. And this is where there's a notion of some of the psychological safety, which has been talked about already. We can kind of introduce some of that through anonymity. And those kind of audits, which we talked about in the last session, you as a leader might pose those questions, but people might not feel able to give answers to those questions. Potentially using some of these tools, you might be able to kind of start getting some of those and maybe kind of create some of that psychological safety, that trust, to get to a point where you don't need the anonymity, but it might be there. It could be there useful to bootstrap. ESO BAST. Everyone speaks once before anyone speaks twice. This makes sure that everyone has that chance to speak. You might not want to speak. You might pass, but it gives you that chance. The anonymous voting prevents anchor bias. Again, I have been in plenty of rooms where we're on a whiteboard, we're using sticky notes, and we're marking votes which we'd like to go for. And that person stays at the back watching, and then they go up last, and they can decide which one. They can allocate their votes, effectively be a kingmaker, and decide what one they want to favour in whichever order. By doing the anonymous voting, we can kind of eliminate that. You're not seeing what other people are voting for. You are voting purely on your own judgment. And then wrapping this all up with vote, discuss, vote. This really encourages like real genuine decision hygiene, right? So we've put in all of these, we've layered all these things together. We've thought about the best response, not the first one. We've done a pre-commit. We've encouraged anonymity for things which might not be said. We've decoupled the ideas. We've done that. Then we go into a debate, and then we go in with another round of voting, where we hopefully might come out with a decision, and maybe people just want pizza and they want to go for lunch. Okay, so just wrapping some of this up, so variations and adaptations. I found it when I'm running a workshop, I find it really useful to have like a slide which says, these are the rules of the engagement. This is what we're going to be doing, especially around some of the concepts like the anonymity and everyone speaks once before anyone speaks twice. It's not something which people would be familiar with, but if you say that up front, you give the members of that discussion the permission to say, you've already spoken, let the next person speak. Now, so we are encouraging that permission to be shared. Think, Write, Share is a great tool just to do that and then have that discussion. It can also be a great tool just for yourself, just for like, I'm just going to think, I'm going to write it down. Sometimes I'm just going to put it down. I'm going to look at it tomorrow. You can use it with the voting. You can use it with the anonymity or not. Just use it for yourself. You can use it for anonymity, or you can just do that for the writing and then show the attribution. You can show the author. With everyone speaks once before everyone speaks twice, you could try different orders. You might want to go on tenure, but generally you'd want to start with the person, the most recent person to join that group. That person could be in the company for a long time, but they might be new to that specific group, because you kind of want to hear those ideas. And again, you want to not have that anchor bias reflect in a different way of saying, well, this person has been there for the longest, therefore they must know, therefore I'm just going to do what they want. You kind of want to go in an inverse order. Same thing for seniority or level. Probably want to start with the most junior person and work up to the most senior, because if the most senior person in the room says that they should do something, chances are most people are probably going to agree with them. Then you can do the voting with or without a non-anonymity, and that you can have that post-vote attribution. Now, I've showed Miro here because many of us are working in remote teams. All of these things can be done in the room as well. It does take a little bit more setup. So you can imagine you've written on Post-it notes. You might fold them, put them in a box, mix them up, pull them out. You don't have to really worry about handwriting at that point. So just use kind of block capitals that can kind of disambiguate handwriting. You can kind of get to those points. On voting, again, if you have things up on a wall, you would number each of the cards, and then you would fill out a voting card and put that in. So you can kind of create these in the room as well. It's actually easier to do it remotely. So you could do it remotely in a room, but you can do it in a room as well. All right, so just to wrap up, we've talked about system 1, system 2, we've talked about anchor bias, we've talked about anonymity, and how to kind of layer these tools and how they can be used independently or how they can be used together to combine kind of bootstrap psychological safety. So we covered Think, Write, Share, we covered anonymity, we've covered anonymous voting, everyone speaks once before anyone speaks twice, and vote, discuss, vote. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Robbie. That was great fun, actually. I enjoyed that. Yeah, it's an interesting one as well. So obviously there is a decision to be made at some point around whether you make the decision on your own or whether you bring in the team and you go through this sort of exercise. Are there any interesting models that you've come across for making that decision, kind of the top level, before you decide whether to bring in the team?
No, I mean, I think ultimately, we live in situations where one person can make many of the decisions. It might not necessarily be a decision. You might just be, I want your recommendations. I want your thoughts on this. I have a proposal. Should we do this proposal or not? You might know what the answer is, but you might want to hear things. These can be excellent tools for seeking challenge as well and dissenters, right? To try and really understand, like, I got this proposal. I think it's the right thing. Help me find the weaknesses in this proposal. So, we framed it today as like helping to make decisions, but it could be like, here's the decision we are going to make. Now let's poke some holes in it. And then you can go back and say, well, do we need to change our decision? Do we need to change our strategy? How do we improve it?
Yeah, so sort of a consultative model rather than a true kind of consensus model, I guess.
I think whether it's consultative or an actual decision probably is more about your organization and the way that the organization runs rather than the individual tools. The tools could be used in either of those situations and probably likely many more.
Yeah, definitely agree. So we've got one. So it's not a question, but it's an interesting conversation starter. So let me bring it up here. When a group knows each other well, people will know who wrote the idea. So I guess it's related to the anonymous voting. Any thoughts
Yeah.
on that?
Um, yeah. I mean, I don't think you can necessarily get away from that. It's like, oh, Robbie always says this thing. When's he going to shut up about refactoring this part? Yeah, you're not necessarily going to get away from that. You might prompt at the beginning of it to say, to warn people of that, like, hey, we know each other really well. If you write something that's going to be really well known, like people are going to figure it out. So I think it's probably just something, in that preamble of like trying to kind of share some, shape some of those things. Or it might be a case of like, look, this is what we're going to be talking about. This thing, we're not going to be talking about that. So, Robbie, you don't need to mention the refactoring of that component. We're going to be talking about this thing. So I think it's about how you go into those conversations.
Yeah, definitely agree. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Robbie. That was, as I said, that
Oh,
was great fun. I always enjoy a bit of Miro action. So
yeah,
yeah,
great. Well, hopefully it was useful for everyone. And again, hope the intention is that you can go into your next meeting and use some of these things. So hope it was useful for people.
excellent, lovely. Thanks very much.